And ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I am Billy Embody. Thanks so much for being with us on this Monday after college football playoff first round weekend. We've got a lot of reaction to get to from all the games, but most importantly, Miami taking down Texas A&M in College Station 10-3. Incredible defensive battle, two elite defenses, two offenses that really couldn't get much of anything going outside of a couple of moments of brilliance in a sense to get this win if you're Miami. But for Texas A&M, their season ends with two straight losses and really a group of games over the final few games that were not nearly the level of sharpness that we saw early in the season from the Aggies. Miami, on the other hand, finishes incredibly strong, takes the game, and is able to slam the door shut on Texas A&M with that game-sealing interception by Bryce Fitzgerald in the back of the end zone. Incredible ball game. I actually watched it with my wife and my son, and for the most part, my son was able to sit still and watch it. And but you could tell that everyone was on edge watching that game as Miami was really fighting for not only themselves but the ACC as well. And they get a huge feather in the cap there for Mario Cristobal to get that win. It was a great environment in College Station, and Miami. And a lot of the Hurricanes fans that went down there, they showed out. You could hear them at times on the TV broadcast. I felt like, at least, when Texas A&M was driving down the field towards the end of the game, there was a lot of noise as Marcel Reed and the Aggies were trying to tie that football game. But got to give a ton of credit to Miami. Obviously, they had a great plan defensively. Offensively, they were able to limit their mistakes for the most part. We'll talk about one in particular that was huge in a moment. But Miami gets a win, and they're able to advance to the second round, the quarterfinals of the college football playoff, and they'll face Ohio State. Good morning, Hayden Howerton. It was a boring defensive battle, but it was one of the most entertaining ACC games of the year. I love the entertaining defensive battles. Those were two terrific fronts. Ruben Bain stepping up and showing off his elite level of play. The Aggie defense, of course, is one of the best in the country and tops in the SEC. But that Miami defense just made it fun to watch. That Texas A&M defense, I thought, made it fun to watch. You were kind of pulling your hair out a little bit if you're an offensive-minded person, which I am. I played quarterback in high school, played for a cup of coffee as a walk-on at SMU. But watching that Miami and Texas A&M offensive struggles happen just brought me back to the early 2010s when the Alabamas and the LSUs and some of those other teams near the top of defensive college football were at that level, giving up 5, 6, 7 points a game. Just a wild difference in college football back then. But both teams, at times really went under center and were operating under that pro style offense. So it was intriguing to watch the defensive chess match between these two coaches go down to the wire, and Miami was able to make enough plays. And I think that's where it's exciting as far as a defensive battle might go, because you have some turnovers, you have some game-changing momentum plays by each defense that really made it feel like the stakes were raised, and the offenses were trying to play mistake-free, but they couldn't because they were playing a little too conservative. So we'll get into the breakdown. We'll get into the box score. We'll get into the post-game reaction. I thought the on-field celebration and a lot of the talking points from not only Miami's side, but the ACC network were great. SMU head coach Rhett Lashley joined the huddle crew for the pregame, the halftime, and postgame. So really good stuff there for the ACC as a whole. And speaking of good stuff, on All Access AM, we are pushing forward to that 300 subscriber mark. We do want to get to 500. We want to hit that next major mark. But we've seen a lot of you guys subscribe over the last few days and get us to 220. So I did want to recognize that. It is a slow build. We're not spending money on paid subscribers to get us to that 1,000 plateau, which is really the kind of early century mark of what you want for a YouTube channel. But please scan that QR code in the corner of your screen, and it'll take you to the All Access AM YouTube channel where you can subscribe for absolutely free, costs you nothing, and it gets you locked in with us on the show so that you see all the videos. We're doing a little bit of a better job cutting them up so you can see different segments and things like that. But please support the channel. That is the number one way you can help us is following along on YouTube and of course Apple and Spotify if you would like to get this in podcast form. But our Monday show is presented by our friends at Security National Bank. Go to securitynational.bank for more information on how they can help you reach your goals financially and whether that be through your personal side of things or your business side of things. Security National Bank, a family-owned business, has been doing it for decades, and they are in the Christmas spirit of helping you out by giving back to you and your story and your personal story, your business story. They have that expertise, whether you're a big business, small business, family owned, new, or established. Security National Bank can help you and have been doing that for more than half a century. So they will close early Christmas Eve to spend time with family and do all of that. But you can go to securitynational.bank for more information. And if you want to reach out by phone, you can give them a call, 402-344-7300. Do that today and get it locked in and start that process before the Christmas holiday gets in full swing. So we appreciate Security National Bank for sponsoring our Monday show. When you look at this football game between Miami and Texas A&M, it was, I thought, built up as the most entertaining game of the weekend. And just because these two teams had not played in the regular season, of course, they had a future or they had a common opponent in Notre Dame who was sitting at home and being big Texas A&M fans, I'm sure, hoping that the Aggies were able to dispatch Miami so that they could have their talking points restored and rejuvenated and all those things about why they should have been in. But I want to go to post game really quickly. Miami head coach Mario Cristobal did a great job expressing the value around head to head. And I've listened to a lot of what he said throughout it when it came to kind of campaigning and whatnot for their spot in the college football playoff. But I thought this was the most important thing. And I'm paraphrasing. But when you have players that are hurt, that are banged up, that are injured, that are fighting through, that are getting treatment right after the game, and Notre Dame, if they would have gotten in the college football playoff, you would have said, hey, guess what? All of that fight, all of that pain, and all of that effort you put in, it didn't impact our future. It didn't impact whether we'd be in the college football playoff. We beat Notre Dame, but guess what? It didn't matter. That's not what he was saying, but he was saying the never devalue the head to head, because as soon as you devalue that and you devalue all the reasons why you ask players to fight, to battle through, to band together and try to reach a common goal, which is just getting a win on a football field at all cost in this sport that is just built on the backs of warriors, then we've really lost the plot. And we all know that the plot is by far already lost in college football. But never devalue the value of head-to-head competition was what Mario Cristobal was talking about. And I thought his point around the players and how they were getting treatment, how they were beaten and bruised and all of those things, fighting for a singular win, never devalue that. I thought that was the best argument you could have had for the true reasoning around head to head when it comes to two teams, especially that have same record, same quality of wins, and or excuse me, same quality of schedule and some of the things that were talked about by talking heads on both sides, and just truly making the argument for the team that they feel like is the better team. And we've seen now Miami close the regular season very, very well, and we've seen Miami go out and take it to especially a team in Texas A&M, the home team that had 100,000+ behind them, working for their team and trying to make it as difficult as possible on Miami. we saw them go into a hostile environment and play the right brand of football to get a win. Just terrific stuff from Miami to get that done. Let's jump into the box score though, and kind of how this one happened. I do want to say a special shout out to college kickers. Man, just a brutal day with the wind playing a factor, no question about it. In College Station, both kickers had their struggles, and it impacted a lot of the decision making down the stretch. Carter Davis 1 for 4 for Miami, had a long of 21, kind of had the chip shot, and even Sean McDonough was talking about it on the ESPN broadcast where he was like, "This is what you would call a gimme if you're talking about golf," but he had a tough day, usually one of the best in the country. On the flip side, Texas A&M has had their kicking struggles, and Randy Bond and Jared Zirkle did go 1 for 2, combined 1 for 2, and Randy Bond hit a 35-yarder to tie the game up in the fourth quarter. And you're kind of thinking, okay, is Miami going to hold on, or have they exerted so much energy over the course of this football game that they're just not going to be able to make it happen? Well, they didn't let go of the rope. They pulled it right back the other way, and they got hit with a whole bunch of adversity in the process of it, as they were, on the move. They were making their move toward a really the game winning drive, and they're around midfield, and star freshman Malachi Tony, who had picked up a first down, fumbles the football. Texas A&M takes over. Luckily for the Miami Hurricanes, the defense stepped up, forced a punt. But man, when you talk about a player in Malachi Tony who has been so incredibly important to this football team, and to see him get so upset, and you think, okay, this is a player, this is a person that is struggling right now, and in terms of his demeanor, you have to be worried about it in a sense. But guess what? Miami gets the ball back eventually. They get an opportunity to go down the field, and who do they look to for their third down play? I think it was third down on a little jet sweep. They give it to Baby Jesus, and not only was that a interesting call from the standpoint of, and there was a little bit of debate about it, but I want to give my take on it. But you run him to the sidelines, and at that point, if he gets pushed out of bounds by a Texas A&M player, you're like, oh, wow. Not only did you not burn a ton of clock down to get it to that, minute point, when they ran that play, he scored with 144 to go on the touchdown run. But you had a situation where if he had been tackled inbounds, you're giving the ball back to Texas A&M with a minute, maybe like a minute to go, and they're having to go the length of the field without any timeouts, and not necessarily the length of the field, but they'd have to get into field goal range, which for Texas A&M at that point was the length of the field. And that would be a challenge against Miami in the way that they play defense. But Shannon Dawson and this entire team, they wanted to slam the door shut. And so, they told Malachi Tony, go score, and he did just that. And what a sign and a show of mental strength to execute and to go get your, not necessarily confidence back, because even though it looked the way it did on the sidelines, I think he is generally a very confident football player. I mean, they call him Baby Jesus for a reason, but Malachi Tony had made so many plays over the course of that game. But one of the plays that really could have, I mean, this game really could have been like a 20-3 Miami win. I mean, it could have been far worse. I mean, let's, shut down, maybe one of the field goals still, but could have had another 6 points, could have had a Malachi Tony punt return for a touchdown and push this past the 20-point mark. But it really was a game that I thought, with Malachi Tony scoring that game winning touchdown, I thought it was just poetic, and it just an unbelievable, decision by the Miami staff to go for the jugular, go for the win. And I felt like, watching Malachi Tony and his reaction post game was just really special. Like that is a great coaching move to get it back into his hands, because they know they're going to need him, but also to get him the ball from the standpoint of he's your best player offensively. And we'll get to Mark Fletcher in just a moment, but to see Malachi Tony have that mental fortitude to go out and execute still just really says a lot about his future and where he's going and in the sport. And he's going to be a star for the ACC for the next couple of years as he'll be probably 3 and out in all likelihood. But just a big day for him to get that game-winning touchdown. Mark Fletcher and what he did on the ground, though, and this Miami run game, who outside of Mark Fletcher was fairly limited. 17 carries, 172 yards, 10 yards a carry. He didn't get a touchdown, obviously, but what a performance by him. It was just awesome to watch them run the football down Texas A&M's throat to score that game-winning touchdown. 56-yard run on the game-winning touchdown drive. I thought watching the Miami offense kind of go, and even that fourth that drive right before the game-winning touchdown drive where Mark Fletcher gets the ball and rips off a 16-yard run to start. And you look at the start of the second half where they went down and scored a field goal. I felt like they were really mixing it up well. They were getting some other guys involved, and then as they're kind of getting things going, Mark Fletcher just in the second half kind of took over. I felt like, and there were some times where you felt like, okay, if they lean on the run game, they're going to run it right down their throat of Texas A&M's for the rest of the game. But they kind of got away from it at times, and you heard the broadcast. They talked about it a lot, just kind of the lack of commitment to the run and sticking with it. And that wasn't the case this time around in terms of this game. Carson Beck, 14 of 20, 103 yards, touchdown pass technically, but didn't have an interception. And while he was not perfect by any means and missed a couple of throws, I mean, I think he put a couple on that last drive. I think when they were down the red zone, they were kind of throwing it a little bit, and he didn't put them in position to even be intercepted. Like, he was very much playing like, do not turn the ball over, do not be the butt of all the jokes come Sunday morning and Saturday night. But he was able to take care of the football, and then his guys did the rest. But I'm telling you, there was a leaky Texas A&M secondary out there to be had if they really wanted it. But instead they controlled the game on the ground and were able to just kind of play their brand of football that they wanted to. They didn't win the time of possession battle, but it just felt like, watching this game, I felt like Miami was in complete control. And I don't know why, but it just felt that way. But Marcel Reed had 2 interceptions, including the one to Bryce Fitzgerald that sealed it. Of course, Bryce Fitzgerald had one earlier in the game. True freshman All-American, and seeing him, show off his stardom and where his career is headed is really, really cool to see. But I think this Miami defense, as you look to the Ohio State game, and I'll give some brief thoughts in just a moment, but they do have, I think, a team that matches up fairly well against Ohio State. And in particular, if you look at the game plan that an Indiana had against Ohio State, you really could see it happening in the Cotton Bowl. So that game, I think, is really a game that we could see Miami advance. I think getting over this first hump was the most important and the most difficult one for this Miami team to get through. And when you look at what they accomplished, I mean, they should have all the confidence in the world now. And Mario Cristobal was interviewed on the field after the game, and you mentioned the 100 versus 100,000, and let's just call it what it is. Miami did well. You look at post game, all of the fans that came down to congratulate this team, they really stepped up in a huge way for them, making a good bit of noise. But when you look at what Miami, their mindset and the way they coach this team going into it, I thought the messaging was perfect. It was 100 versus 100,000 and more. There were people all week, of course, talking about Miami and how are they going to, make any plays against this Texas A&M defense and whatnot. But you know, it was a game that I kind of had circled as low scoring and an opportunity that this Miami defense, if they match up well enough against Marcel Reed, who had been playing well, that they could get this one across the finish line, and they did. And that's the thing about playoff football now is there's no style points, there's no comparing the pit game head to head. There's no this, no that. Can you advance? Can you win? All of those things that Miami accomplished in this game, are going to serve them really well against Ohio State and a team that is, going to be feeling confident as well in a sense, but also looking to bounce back from a loss in the Big Ten championship. And I think Miami going to Texas A&M and getting over this first marker was so critical. And obviously it keeps their season alive. That's the obvious, but it is a game that Mario Cristobal, for him to win, now he won. He's not been announced as having a contract extension, but I'm sure Miami will relock him up with another extension in the offseason. Now it gives tangible proof to what they're doing. And they're not just a team that would have just gotten in to this college football playoff and gotten in on the back of beating Notre Dame early in the season, but they were able to go out there and really validate all the things that Mario Cristobal is doing with this program as a whole. So, side note, just now, according to our friend David Hale of ESPN, Mark Fletcher has told Miami he is coming back for the 2026 season. Of course, that's the day and age that we live in. But cool note in his ESPN story that just dropped online, and maybe it was from, just dropped this morning. David Hale's one of the great writers, I think, right now in college football. But Shannon Dawson, the Miami offensive coordinator, said, "We're riding you down the field," and sure enough, Mark Fletcher made a good bit of work on that opening 56-yard run that he had on that drive. But he really had the confidence not only in himself, the offensive line, and he was one of the key Miami players that was over there supporting Malachi Toney and telling him to keep his head up and things like that. And I just think I interviewed Mark Fletcher. I went and watched him play at St. Thomas Aquinas, or excuse me, sorry, big mistake, American Heritage, coming out of high school, and spoke with him after a game that was, I believe, maybe it had to have been his senior year of being at Heritage. Might have been his junior, but just a stand-up young man who lost his father a year ago. If you watch the game, the ESPN broadcast was talking about that. I know my wife Michelle was kind of falling in love with his mom Linda, going nuts in the stands. So a really special day for the Fletcher family, and one that I know his dad was watching down over him with that one. But this is where you get these stories and they become more nationally known and things like that, and what these guys go through, and who they're playing for, not only their team and their teammates and their coaches, but their family and what they're going through with their family. So Mark Fletcher, one of the good stories come out of this first weekend of the college football playoff. That does set up Miami against Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl of this college football playoff quarterfinal round. And what a fun matchup. Two teams that would love to play another similar game to what we just saw in College Station, and they'll get a chance to do it in Dallas, New Year's Eve, 6:30 p.m. Central Time. So be locked in for that one. I know I'll be watching and ready to see what Miami is going to roll out against Ohio State. I think it's an advantageous matchup for Miami. I don't say that from the standpoint of, Miami is going to go out there and take advantage of all the matchups and blow Ohio State out. I just think now that we've seen Miami play a team that has a front like Texas A&M and do what they did on both sides of the ball, they do have the horses to do that against an Ohio State if they play to the level they can. We also had Ole Miss take care of business against Tulane, and Oregon take care of business against James Madison. Not surprising there. Ole Miss takes on Georgia in the Sugar Bowl January 1st. 7 p.m. Central Time. Oregon takes on Texas Tech January 1st, 11 a.m. in the Orange Bowl. And then Alabama comes back to beat Oklahoma 34-24 to face Indiana in the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. New Year's Day, 3 p.m. Central Time. All of those games on ESPN. You can catch them at. We'll have some more college football playoff breakdowns as we get closer to that, probably right after Christmas. But I do think right off the bat, the two most intriguing games of the next round got to be Miami, Ohio State, just because now you've seen Miami do what they did on the road against Texas A&M. What are they going to follow that up with against Ohio State? And I will say this, I think Ole Miss, Georgia is going to be intriguing. Ole Miss looked really sharp, was in complete control of that football game for the most part. Georgia's obviously playing at a high level, having won the SEC championship. But we do have a rematch of a game from earlier this season where Ole Miss really should have won. So both teams going to be very comfortable in the Sugar Bowl as well, with Ole Miss really making a short trek and Georgia being in a familiar spot in Mercedes-Benz Superdome. So with that, guys, do want to bring in James Fletcher of On3 Sports here, our bracketologist, talk a little bit about ACC basketball as well. We'll get to Jeff Brohm and Michigan, the coaching search. We'll talk about Louisville, Toledo, and their bowl game this week, and we'll recap NC State, Memphis. We do that on the other side of this break, presented by our friends at Sportsmo, the Sportsmo app. Go to sportsmo.org. That's sportsmo.org to learn more about how you could support your favorite college team. And some very exciting news coming in the new year from this group that has been terrific in supporting All Access AM. But you too can get involved with our friends at Sportsmo and build your group chat up and help support your student athletes with micro donations and bets with our friends at Sportsmo. So we'll be back with James Fletcher on the other side of this break on All Access AM.
Sportsmo lets you make a more direct impact on the game because it lets you, the fans, fund your favorite college football teams in a straightforward way. In a you win and I'll give way. In a I need you to show me your running game is alive and then I'll donate way. These real-time tax-deductible microfunds lead to impact your team can feel. Every cent you send mixes with every drop of sweat they put in. Form your squad. Boost your friends when a play comes through. A new way to follow the game. And cha-ching, your favorite team. So what do you say, difference makers? Ready to power the play? Sportsmo. Download today. Let's smo.
And we are now joined by James Fletcher of On3 Sports. James, thanks so much for the time to kick off this weekend. How are you?
I'm good. Just getting ready for the holidays. I've got a wedding coming up, so trying to balance everything here. Covering college basketball, preparing for obviously the holidays, and then the wedding as well. So busy times here on this end.
Love it. Well, a busy weekend. Let's get to Duke, Texas Tech. A heartbreaker in a sense for Duke. They come out and lose a close one to Texas Tech in Madison Square Garden, an electric atmosphere, but Duke just unable to pull this one out against the top 25 Texas Tech team. But for Duke, Cam Boozer again, having the type of the game that you expect from him at this point, but just not enough when you have Texas Tech playing the way they did with JT Toppin and Watts and of course Christian Anderson leading the way with 27.
Yeah, this Duke team has been obviously undefeated up until that point. One of the top teams in college basketball. There's no question about that. The way that Cam Boozer leads them in almost all categories for this team. But with that said, they've been the slightest bit vulnerable. They haven't felt like a team that's just going to go out and dominate. Sure, against a lower level of competition, I think that they are expected to do that and have done that to this point. But there's really no shame necessarily in losing to a Texas Tech team that has a preseason All-American, one of the favorites for preseason Player of the Year in JT Toppin across the country. And then Christian Anderson, who's been really good, Lawan Watts, who's been incredible. They obviously built up the core of that team around those guys as well. So They got caught on a day. They played it close still, no blowout, nothing like that. So no reason to sound the alarm bells, but just a reminder for Duke, and I think their players, as much as anything, that they've got some stuff left to figure out in this rotation. There's some spots that aren't producing at a high enough level to go out there and dominate night in, night out, the way that you're going to need to come March to make a deep run in the tournament.
And what were probably a couple of the key areas that you felt like Duke just didn't have it against Texas Tech? Because, obviously Duke has played some tests and has been able to get some quality wins already on their resume, but is just, defensively, is that probably where they didn't bring it just enough from a consistency perspective?
I think there's definitely some holes defensively, and that's something that when you talk about basketball, there's ups and downs. Like even when you talk about the best defensive teams in the world, sometimes they give up a lot of points, and sometimes it has to do with pace of play. The opposition, of course, can force a lot of things. The way that the refs are officiating the game has a big impact on the way that you play defense nightly, and it can change. So sometimes you'll have to adjust on the fly. There's a lot of things that go into defense. And so while, yes, that was definitely something that popped up in this game, I think really it's the depth of production that they've got to worry about. Coming into the year, we thought that Dame Sarr would come in and be a big-time impact guy. He's been more of a role player coming off the bench more often than not in these recent games. You hoped that Caleb Foster would take a big leap forward. He's still a productive basketball player, somebody who can give you a positive result, but he's not a kind of anchoring this team for 35 minutes as the point guard, keeping everything going. You've seen Caden Boozer play more of a role in some of the games than others at this point. Kamania as well. So you're talking about point guard, small forward, basically around Cam Boozer and then Isaiah Evans as the secondary guy. You just haven't every night known the consistent amount of production, whether that's offense, defense, hustle plays that you're going to get from these different areas of the floor. And that makes it more difficult because you can load up against the best players if you're the opposing team and make sure that they're not going to beat you. Really leave it in the hands of these role players.
North Carolina on the other side of this North Carolina-Duke rivalry does get a win over Iowa State. Not a top 25 team in Madison Square Garden, but man, the theatrics right there in NYC were on display. Caleb Wilson, 20 points in the game to lead everybody. But what a game-winning shot. I mean, onions, as they say, to have that type of a shot fall on that one to beat the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I think that really this North Carolina team has almost been the inverse of what I just said about Duke's concerns. And while North Carolina was not expected to be at the level that Duke was entering the season, they've come closer and closer together in our projections, in all the analytics, because they've got Caleb Wilson, who is kind of that freshman star, that potential lottery pick, working his way up into the top 5 of NBA mock drafts. And then Henry Vesar being that second guy, that kind of anchor of production that you're going to get. But the supporting cast has come through, I think, in a better way consistently than we've seen from their rivals across Tobacco Road. So for North Carolina, it has been an incredible start to the season. Everything that people had hoped for. There's a lot of pressure on this team to come out and perform this season, and I think they've delivered to this point. Really impressed by their ability to combine offense and defense together and overachieve to this point. Now they get into conference play as we keep rolling on. We'll see if they can night in, night out against the teams that know them best, know how to stop what they want to do, if they can continue this role and really get into the 1 seed, 2 seed conversation along the way.
And we saw Seth Trimble return as well, and a huge piece of news there. Obviously, North Carolina's probably emotional leader in a sense, the veteran guard, add 17 in the return to the floor, 6 of 13 from the field for him, 3 assists on the night. Just a really all-around solid effort from him. What does that say about him to return and play the way that he did that night, but also having that type of an impact back for the entirety of what we're going to be seeing from the Tar Heels when it comes to the ACC slate that does begin after a matchup against East Carolina tomorrow night or tonight.
Yeah, it's big to get him back, and especially to see him have that production, because he's another one of these guys that has been there, has had kind of a slow progression forward in his counting stats, at least for this North Carolina team throughout his career there. And now, if he can make another leap up and be a big time impact player in that starting lineup, you're talking about having 3 levels. And that's so important in the game of basketball, to have a guy in the backcourt who can run things, to have a guy at the forward spot who has huge upside, but also a huge impact on a nightly basis. And then Henry Vasar in the middle, protecting the paint and getting you points at the rim on the other end. You are so versatile when you can have those 3 spots lined up. Any defense that you face is going to leave a hole where one of those 3 will be able to exploit it. So huge for North Carolina, big for Seth Trimble to come back and have that big of a game, build up the confidence immediately. We know that basketball shape is different than getting back from an injury, on the treadmill, in the gym, working out. So to have that kind of confidence boost that, okay, I am healthy, I am good to go, everything feels good. Now he's going to be able to really work moving forward on everything that he's missed in terms of the chemistry, rather than trying to worry about, I need to fix my jump shot and then make sure that my legs are under me, those types of things. So it just makes everything a little bit easier when you can have that big return from injury.
Let's move over to another team that's sitting in a decent spot early on this season. Clemson getting a win over Cincinnati. This game was interesting. I couldn't really wait to talk about it because they almost completely fumbled this bag over a Cincinnati team that's 7-5, a proud program in Cincinnati that just is kind of fallen off ever since really Mick Cronin left. And I think with Clemson, being able to hold off that type of a comeback in a matchup against a Big 12 team was also important. Another, not necessarily feather in the cap by any means, but just a game that doesn't become a talking point for ACC basketball, with Clemson getting the win.
Yeah, for me, it was a lot of growth. That was the word that kept coming to mind when Clemson was able to hold on to that one despite, letting Cincinnati hang around and get back into it. Because we just saw them a couple of weeks ago play against a BYU team where they got up huge in the first half. It looked like they were going to run away, potentially enter the top 25 based off the strength of that win, playing against the top 10 team and just really controlling the game. And then it all came falling down. And then A.J. DeBonsa got hot, and they lost to that BYU team. And it felt like, maybe this is where this Clemson team is, but you would much rather find out that that's where you are by a long course of a game ending up down by 10 points rather than being up by 15-20 and still losing by that amount. That hurt just a little bit more, but to see them kind of be able to anchor down and get the job done this time around, I think shows you some signs of growth, but shows you still that you've got some things to work on in these next couple of weeks as you kind of prepare, get through the end of the non-conference schedule and into conference play. Things aren't perfect. You let a big lead slip, and then you almost let it happen again. So you've got to get in the gym. You've got to watch a lot of tape and figure out, what is it that we're doing? Are we letting our foot off the gas? Or is it something that teams are just figuring us out that late in the games, and we need to switch things up schematically to figure this out? I have every faith that Brad Brownell is going to be able to get that job done and figure out what's wrong, and it'll be on the players to deliver out there through ACC play.
Let's go to NC State here, and Will Wade. First of all, I do want to kind of get your reaction if you saw the clip. Will being Will almost, and I know him pretty well and have seen him go off on his teams at times, and especially in year one of his tenures, because he wants to set an expectation. And you see a guy in Will Wade who will absolutely fight for his players, will fight for his team, and in turn, he expects the same. He expects that same level of that fight, that mentality that it's us against the world kind of thing that Will now goes through really every time he steps onto the court to coach. And to have that type of reaction after a game, but then to get the type of result that they were looking for, beating an Ole Miss team that is really down this year. What was your reaction to that fiery press conference, and then what you saw against Ole Miss this weekend?
Yeah, there's 2 parts to that statement that I really like. The first one was that he's not afraid to say it. There's so many of these coaches nowadays. We know we're in the NIL era. We know that there's a lot of pay for play, and they'll always tell you that other programs are focused on the wrong thing. They don't care about student athlete anymore. They just focus on the athlete part. But that's not what they do. They're all about, this and that and whatever. They want to sell you that the good old days are still alive at their school, but not any other school. Will Wade says, no, forget that. This is the NIL era. I paid these guys to come here. I don't care if they have a 3.0 team GPA if they can't play basketball. I'll send them back to the transfer portal and they can go have a good GPA at a different school next year. That's that's just the reality of where we are in college sports. Good, bad, indifferent, whatever you want to say. It's a different time. The team GPA is not something that you put on the graphic anymore if you want to impress your boosters, impress the people who need to be donating NIL money. You put wins and losses on that graphic. You put the stats, the amount of accolades that they have accumulated, whether it's at the college level or on into the NBA level once they do graduate or do move on to the next level of basketball. Those are the things that matter in this era in terms of creating success. There was definitely a place in a different time where the team GPA mattered, where getting guys who had a certain, history to them was something that would benefit you. But it just doesn't in the same way anymore. You can take a little bit more of a risk on some of these guys and bring them in because it is so results oriented. So for Will Wade to come out and kind of say that quiet part out loud, he's not the only one either. Rick Pitino has done it quite a bit recently. And I've just been impressed with the coaches who are willing to come out and say, this is a different era. I can talk differently with these players, way more of a pro mentality, the way that you can talk about them and speak about their performances. Penny Hardaway even fining a player at Memphis, his NIL money for conduct that was detrimental to the team or not up to the standards. So it is a new era. We're starting to see things come around. So interested to see that. But then from, as you said, a year one team building perspective, Will Wade also understands that he brought in this group of guys. And so this season is built on, he doesn't want to 2-3 years down the road build up a program. He wants to have success now. If he's going to get it, he's got to have someone who's going to take over that locker room, who's going to be the vocal leader, who's going to step up and say, all right, coach called us out. Coach said that somebody has to take the reins here. That's going to be me. And I think that's what he was looking for in that moment. And we'll see if he got it. I think that there's some good candidates in that room to do it. But everyone has their own personality, and it's part of the transfer portal now. That's so interesting is you might have heard of these guys. You might have a familiarity with some of them. But for the most part, when you go get these guys, you know their stats. You know what your analytics guy told you about how he projects at this level. And maybe one phone call with a high school coach, maybe one phone call with his old college coach if they're on good terms after he entered the portal. But really, there's a lot of swing and see what happens with these guys in terms of their fit, not only just with the program and with the coach, but with each other. Guys who have never played together, probably never met each other, all coming together and having to figure out their pecking order. And you're talking about 10 to 15 guys who are all trying to figure out where vocally, where on the court, where off the court they fit in. So it's a big adjustment. And I think we're seeing that some teams across the country that are kind of getting into gear now. And we're wondering, what was it early in the season? Well, a lot of it was these guys are still figuring each other out. And so as we get into conference play, we're going to see some teams that are going to rise up and be much better over the back half than they were in the first half. We might see some teams that fall off too as well, though, as tensions continue to build. It's just an extra element that makes college basketball so interesting in this era.
James Fletcher, awesome stuff recapping ACC basketball this weekend, some of the trends, some of the teams to watch. We appreciate your time. On3 bracketologist James Fletcher joining us on All Access AM this morning.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Anytime. Thanks for thanks for joining us, James Fletcher on All Access AM. Have a Merry Christmas, brother, and we will see you after the break as plenty of ACC basketball talk to be had, of course, as conference play approaches. And look, There was a lot of magic down in College Station for Miami this weekend as they were able to take down the Aggies and move on in the college football playoff. Make sure that you get the right amount of magic for your next event. Our friends at Corporate Magic are the go-to source for elite event planning and execution. Corporate Magic has been doing it for decades, and you need a team that understands the big stage and that they need to deliver on that big stage. And they have shown every step of the way in the events and productions that they put on that they can do that. And so visit corporatemagic.com for more information. They are proudly based in Dallas, right smack dab in the center of all of the ACC in a sense. This production company develops concepts, builds a show, and manages every single detail for your company, whether it be national sales meetings, whether it be stadium concerts or global broadcast and productions as a whole that are seen by millions. They can do it. They've been doing it for years. So visit corporatemagic.com to learn more. Click the link in our podcast description portion of the link, and make sure you get more information on Corporate Magic and what they can do for your company. Great opportunity for you guys that are in the corporate world, so to speak, to find a new partner to put on your events, your national sales meetings in particular. Think about that. Think about the level you can get to as far as being a hero for your company if you get Corporate Magic involved on the national sales meetings and blow it out of the water, because that's what they do. They do it at a high level for their partners. So appreciate Corporate Magic supporting All Access AM. Going into the final few minutes of this show, we've got coaching carousel discussion. Jeff Brohm is the latest name to be linked to the Michigan coaching job. That, according to Pete Nakos and Chris Bayless of On3 Sports. They've got the lowdown on their websites and where this stands. The Wolverine is rolling with news on the Michigan coaching carousel and the replacement for Sharon Moore, who's been let go, of course, after that situation that developed in Ann Arbor. And with Kalen DeBoer winning and beating Oklahoma, we now see Michigan continue to shift their eyes a little bit. And Kenny Dillingham signed a contract extension with Arizona State. Well, Jeff Brohm at Louisville has surfaced as a candidate for Michigan. And I think this is interesting. Number one, back in October, back in November, we were talking about Jeff Brohm, the former Louisville quarterback, as somebody who was working towards a contract extension with his school. And I saw a interview with maybe our friends at ESPN Radio in Louisville with the Louisville AD talking about how they were getting on the same page with Jeff Brohm as far as what he needed from a resources perspective, working towards that contract, and went on the record talking about it. But that was before the Michigan job opened up. And this is a job that I think would fit Jeff Brohm very well. And you think about the Michigan brand and their identity, I think a hard-nosed, edge kind of coach would do wonders, because Michigan doesn't necessarily flash their NIL, contrary to, the Bryce Underwood contract and what they put together to get the 5-star quarterback onto campus. But what they do is they pride themselves on being that hard-nosed football team. And that's Jeff Brohm's mentality. That's who he is. I think from a fit perspective, this arguably could be one of the best fits on the market for the Michigan coaching job. The only problem for ACC fans and the ACC would be it would come at the cost of the Louisville job opening up. So this is a fascinating one to look at as he now becomes a name to know. And Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri is another name that continues to be in the mix, but it doesn't really seem like that is materializing. Jed Fish at Washington is another name that doesn't really seem like it's going to materialize, but is still linked to it. But with Jeff Brohm and what he's been able to do at Louisville with good resources, but not great resources, you could argue this Michigan job would be terrific for him as a person, even though it would mean leaving his alma mater. He does have a contract that is not really that hard to get out of. It is under $1 million. And if you're looking for a low stakes coach, in a sense, to bring in to Michigan, that is certainly of note with that buyout being under $1 million. But interim head coach Biff Poggi is also, or Poggi, it's been a few years since he's been the Charlotte head coach, and I've remembered how to pronounce his last name. But he is the interim coach. He's getting some support within Michigan circles, but it is a really interesting dynamic there if you were to go that route, kind of CEO of a program type of mentality there. But Jeff Brohm would certainly bring a little bit of an offensive identity to Michigan with the work that he's done for the most part with his quarterbacks, and Bryce Underwood looking for a little bit maybe of a jump in what he could have in his second year at Michigan. But when you look at this Michigan coaching search, it continues to trudge on, and really scary times for Michigan as they get closer and closer to maybe having to hire a coordinator. I don't know. It is a fascinating job that is really in a spot now where it's not panic time because it's December 22nd and the portal doesn't open until January 2nd. Any coach that they hire, for the most part, unless it's Jesse Minter of the NFL, is going to be well-versed of who is in the portal, who's going to be in the portal, kind of having a portal plan that they could put in place for this program. But as you get really close, it gets dicey. I think if they don't have a coach in place by like December 27th, having been introduced, announced, all that, get to work, you're really looking at an interesting situation here for Louisville, or for, Louisville potentially as well. But Michigan, as the job would be filled or not filled at that point. So that's kind of my drop dead date, would be December 27th or so. That gives you time to, again, if he's been introduced at that point, or at least been announced, they can do a press conference in mid-January for all that Michigan cares, as long as they're working on the portal. But if you get your guy by about December 27th, that would really be that drop dead date before you can kind of start being like, okay, the portal's going to open and Michigan's not going to have a coach. And it'll be fascinating to watch it unfold here and see if Jeff Brohm does in fact leave his alma mater for Michigan. But masterful job by the agent of Jeff Brohm, at least maybe getting him more and more and more involved with the Michigan coaching search, and putting Louisville in a position where they need to give more and more and more to keep him and give him the resources that he needs to compete at a high level in the ACC. So could be good news from the fact that Jeff Brohm could have more resources at one point for that Louisville job. But if he leaves, the Cardinals are going to have to put a major reset on the program and find a new coach. So we'll continue to track that for you guys on All Access AM. Pierce, good to see you this morning. How is the Michigan AD still employed? I agree. If you think that they found out about this entire situation with Sharon Moore right after the Ohio State game, I got some oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you, because I think the whispers were very loud. That's my opinion, and that enough people knew, and it didn't change until after they lost to Ohio State. Not to be a conspiracy theorist, I think that's an easy out for Michigan. And I'm sure with the season they were having, and arguably had really the year previous to, despite beating Ohio State, that some people were like, I don't know if this is our guy long term. So I'm surprised that Ward Manuel is still the AD, but maybe he knows where the bodies are buried. Who knows? Louisville does play a football game Tuesday afternoon, though, which adds to the intrigue of all of this with Jeff Brohm. Tuesday, 1 p.m. Central Time, Louisville takes on Toledo and Boca Raton in the Flagler Credit Union Stadium in the Bush's Beans Boca Raton Bowl. Louisville favored by 6.5. In the bowl preview that we did, I'm not sure if we did a pick on this, but I will say I think I had Louisville covering. Now I don't know. A lot of buzz around Jeff Brohm and Louisville and Michigan job. So this would be a brutal loss for Louisville and the ACC, of course. But this is kind of the drama that we're in right now with the coaching carousel. You look at this Toledo defense and what they're bringing to the table. They're one of the best in the country statistically. 12.2 points per game, 91.3 rushing yards per game, and 156.5 passing yards a game. They do have an All-American safety in Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, and they have plenty of guys that can create issues for this Louisville team if they don't bring it. And it's going to be fascinating to see Miller Moss start that final game and try to go out a winner. And he'll be without Chris Bell, who did suffer a torn ACL against SMU earlier this year. They do have two opt-outs, defensive lineman Wesley Bailey and Renee Konga. It is their third consecutive bowl game under Jeff Brohm. The prediction from our friends at Cardinal Sports, 17-3 Louisville. So they're expecting a low-scoring football game with where this program is at with all of the things around Jeff Brohm and all of that. But Miller Moss, I think, had an interesting quote that I do want to hit on. And it is, you never know when this football thing ends. I'm certainly very excited about the next steps about my career. When you invest so much in a certain group and in your craft, you want to finish it the right way. And he is going to give it his all here for this bowl game and try to go out a winner at Louisville, have them finish 9-4 on the year, which would be a very respectable number for this Louisville program that at one point was right in the mix for the college football playoff. But they do take on Toledo on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central Time. Favored by 6.5. I'm torn. Part of me says Louisville keeps this one close with Toledo, and we see that Louisville, I guess, cloud that is probably hanging over the program with the Jeff Brohm situation come into play there. But on the other hand, I do think Miller Moss is motivated and trying to do this the right way. And I think the rosters should be able to keep Toledo's offense, relatively contained. And I think Louisville will be able to do enough. So give me Louisville. Give me Louisville 21-13 in that game. So just a slight cover, but I could see that being the winning score there down in Boca Raton. Let's go back to Tampa, Florida. And to kick off the college football playoff weekend, it was NC State Memphis having a bowl game in the Gasparilla Bowl. 31-7 NC State beats Memphis at Raymond James Stadium, right there in my hometown on Friday afternoon. Is the first postseason win for NC State since the 2017 Sun Bowl win over Arizona State. The Pack offense, solid day that kicked off its day with a CJ Bailey touchdown run, and they were able to build up a big lead, 31-7, and rolled for the most part in this game. You saw Hollywood Smothers, 108 yards on 19 attempts. CJ Bailey, 14 of 25 for 221 yards and 2 touchdowns. And they started off explosive, and that really set the tone as a whole for this NC State team. And the defense, though, DJ Elliott's group really stepped up in a big way. The Tigers weren't really able to do much of anything. They had 4 3-and-outs. And during that third quarter stretch where they could have maybe fought and made it a game, they got nothing. They had a pair of turnovers and 3 turnovers on downs during that stretch as well. And this Wolfpack defense came to play, and they did it all to slow down this Memphis rushing attack. This Brendan Lewis, the Memphis quarterback, who's been so outstanding. And again, Memphis is going through a coaching change with Ryan Silverfield moving on and not being the head coach of this one. But this is a middle of the road AAC team. This is a game that you love to see the way NC State came out and kick their tails. They really were able to, get everything they wanted in this one and get a win over Memphis for the ACC, kick things off the right way. Again, we have Tuesday, the Bush's Beans Boca Raton Bowl, Louisville versus Toledo. We'll talk about Cal taking on Hawaii Christmas Eve in the Hawaii Bowl as well. We will have All Access AM on Wednesday for sure. We'll kick off Christmas Eve for you guys and do all of that to talk about that bowl game. And also, I think we'll have a Saturday or a Friday show. I'm a little torn on that. It might be pre-recorded. We could also end up doing a long Wednesday show. So we got options. We're going to work through them all, but we do want to obviously enjoy ourselves on this Christmas, and hope you guys do as well. So with that, guys, really appreciate you guys tuning in for another edition of All Access AM. Please hit that QR code that is in the top corner of your screen and subscribe to the channel. Please, it is free to do. All it helps us do is grow this channel, and we've already had one of you guys do that during this show. Please click the subscribe button, whether if you're on YouTube. That is the biggest way you can help us, is to help grow this channel subscription base, so that we can keep growing this in the right way for our entire ACC family. So we've got a lot of exciting plans for 2026 and the new year after bowl season and all that. Once we're into basketball season, got some cool ideas on what we could do to break down ACC football and more on the show, but we need your support. So we appreciate our support we get from Security National Bank. Go to securitynational.bank for more information on how they can help your personal or professional business journey in the banking world. They can do it all for you, a family-owned business. So we appreciate their support, as well as SportsMo. Download the SportsMo app for more ways to support your favorite college football team through micro donations. So lots more to come from our friends at SportsMo on that side of things. And of course, Corporate Magic. Go to corporatemagic.com for more information on how to completely revamp your next company's event into an incredible production with our friends at Corporate Magic. So I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us on this edition of All Access AM. Have a great Monday, everybody. And we will catch you guys Wednesday morning with another edition of All Access AM live, 7 to 8 a.m. Central, 8 to 9 Eastern time. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you next time.